My scariest hallucination? It will always be my first visual hallucination. I was in school, like 10th grade, and I'd heard voices for a bit now, to the point that I was almost getting used to the fact that I could hear things that others don't. I remember getting up from my desk to use the toilet, and when I got out of the room, I see this man with no face just standing there facing me. At first, I just thought my eyes were messing with me, so I blink a couple times, shake my head a little bit, and look back. And he's gone. No way he could have moved in those empty, silent hallways without me hearing it, but he's gone. So I just go to the bathroom, thinking it's kinda weird, but not thinking too much about it. I even joked with myself that now I'm seeing things too. But when I go to the bathroom, he's there again, standing in the doorway. I stop and just kind of stare for a second, more curious than anything. Then I think, well, maybe he's just wearing a mask or something. And I ask if he can move over and let me in the bathroom. But then this other kid comes out and asks who I'm talking to, right as he walks through the faceless guy. I just stand there, speechless. 'Cause what do you say in that situation? The kid looks at me like I'm weird, but then just walks away. The dude with no face moves over to let me by, and I give him as wide a berth as I can while I go in, never taking my eyes off him. He followed me into the bathroom, and a few seconds later this girl walks in, and I begin telling her that she's in the wrong bathroom. I'm a guy, FYI. When I notice that she doesn't have a face either, they both begin walking towards me, and at that point I'm pretty damn scared. So I go and hide in one of the stalls and bawl my eyes out. 'Cause at this point, I realize that I'm pretty much just crazy. I didn't come out until the staff came and talked me into it. The two of them, the guy and the girl, show up every now and again. I've since graduated and moved away from there, but they still show up wherever I am, but they never do anything. So I don't know what to make of it, but that first time scared the living shit out of me. Snipers. One Friday evening, I was watching TV and happened to be playing with a flashlight that I'd left on the coffee table. Boom. Next thing you know, I'm in full-blown hallucination. I heard a special forces team out the window as they were sneaking out of my backyard. I flashed the light around the room and they got quiet. And they misunderstood my intent. They thought the light was mounted on a rifle. Next thing you know, they're calling me outside as a part of a SWAT response. And I'm on my hands and knees on my porch in the dead of night, asking them to please not shoot me. I must have stayed out there for about 2 hours, with my hands locked behind my head, as the snipers got more and more nervous about what I might do. Eventually, they decided that there was no way to defuse the situation, and they shot me. I spent about 5 minutes lying dead on my front porch, then crawled inside my house to die. I phoned my mom to let her know that I'd been shot and that the special forces had killed me. Needless to say, she wasn't buying it and talked me down to earth a little bit, but that wasn't the end of it. She had me go to the ER and stayed with me on the phone until I got there. I'm still in full-blown hallucination mode, so while I'm waiting in the ER, I hear the leader of the Special Forces unit chatting with the front desk nurse. He knows that I'm there, and is coming to get me. Luckily, the doctor found me first, and didn't really know what to do with me, so he gave me 2 milligrams of Ativan and discharged me. So I drive home, still hallucinating, and now somewhat high from the Ativan, and I see all types of crazy stuff on the way home. Once I get home, the Ativan mellows the hallucinations into something enjoyable, and I spend the rest of the weekend with playful hallucinations. I can't really describe the fear of having Special Forces snipers aiming at you for 2 hours straight. Not schizophrenic, but I am bipolar, and was investigated for schizophrenia while they were trying to diagnose me due to hallucinations. I initially heard what I thought was a broken radio, both in my home and car, for about 6 months. I had just moved from another house with my then boyfriend, and therefore was quick to dismiss noises I didn't recognize. However, I began to be 100% convinced that a couple were living in the garage and wanted to hurt me. I refused to ever go into the garage. The one time I did, with my SO, he noted a door was open, and I sprinted away with the torch, and was midway texting his mom that he was probably dead when he came back in, reasonably pissed. A few months later, I had the scariest night of my life. I had just broken up with the above SO for various reasons, but somewhat including absolute paranoia and panic. Having just told him it was over, I went to the bathroom to cry. I looked down, and my entire body was covered in spiders. I freaked. Couldn't turn to him for help, obviously, so I went back to the spare room. An hour after that, I heard two voices, about 20 centimeters behind me, over my right shoulder, in unison, growl, "It's coming." Startled, I look up to see a black tall figure in the corner of the room. Startled, I look up to see a black tall figure in the corner of the room. Imagine the same shape as a really tall Queen's Guard, and very, very evil. At this point, I ran out of the room back to my SO, who understandably kicked me back out. He has since apologized and didn't know what was going on, just that I was acting crazy. I left the next day for 2 months. I moved back when my SO left, and have been happy without many incidents since. I often describe bipolar as having small tasters of other mental disabilities, but the luck of only having them temporarily. My pet psychiatrist all initially thought I had schizophrenia when I was first admitted, and if what I experienced was half as bad as the actual disease, I'm eternally grateful I'm not. I only have psychosis, so not full schizophrenia, but I still have hallucinations and delusions. I'm a woman, and to be honest, both of my worst ones are pretty unbelievable because they sound so unusual compared to what you usually hear about in the media. My worst hallucinations have actually been tactile, touch-based. So not quite what you're looking for, but there's a visual one also at the end, which was very scary at the time. The tactile hallucination I got a few times a year, but 2016 was the worst. They began in 2014, where something invisible would climb into bed with me and spoon me. It progressed from there, and it got a lot more handsy, but a round of antipsychotics got rid of them. In 2016, it came back majorly. I don't want to say it had sex with me because it's a hallucination. It's not real, and there was definitely nothing visual, but something did happen. It only happened once for the next few days. It would begin to touch me outside of my bedroom and during the day. One time, it pinned me against the sink while I was washing dishes. It kind of felt like a power play almost, like it's saying, "Look what I can do. I can get you anywhere I want." Scary shit. Another round of antipsychotics got rid of it. I'm dreading the next flare-up. The visual hallucination happened one night walking home from class at university. I was hit by a sudden dizzy spell that made my vision distort a bit. Then it felt like I was being pulled to look to the other side of the road where the woods was. There stood Slenderman. Needless to say, I instantly ran back to the house without looking back and didn't sleep that night. This one was probably the first thing that made me realize something wasn't quite right. The tactile stuff started when I returned home at the end of the school year. The Slenderman stabbing case happened shortly after this hallucination actually. I think it might have been the same year, strangely enough. I started to suffer from hallucinations in high school, considering I had never had a reason to question my mental soundness. I just perceived everything I heard as real. It also helped that I was raised Catholic, and as such had underlying beliefs on the existence of demons and such. It really started as just hearing faint whispers in the background. I always thought it was just part of my conscious, expressing like different thoughts I was not actively thinking over. It started as hearing whispers that made me feel I was an outcast, that my friends were against me, and I was alone and isolated. As absurd as it is to say this, after hearing that for a while, I began to believe it. It completely altered my behavior, and I began to doubt all my friends and seclude myself from them, as I thought that they were conspiring against me or faking sentiment. I used that to explain how hallucinations affected me. Now the scariest thing I heard? After maybe a year of not expressing concern about these whispers, it got worse. Being much more isolated, there was weeks when I barely spoke to anyone at all, as I fully believed I was hated by everyone I knew. During these weeks, all I had were the whispers, which I had come to respect, as I thought it was my own thoughts communicating aspects of life I could not actively see. The whispers then suddenly shifted to voices that were inhuman, booming, bone-chilling, and commanding. They told me they were beings of different nature, a higher one, and that they now had me under their ownership. They expressed that I was a pawn to them, but that me being an outcast made them sympathetic to me. I was told that I needed to be put back into society, and the only way to do it was to take care of the people who didn't like me. The hateful sentiment was logically coming from my former crush, and by killing her, I would remove the person spreading negative thoughts about me. Now, at the time, I was only hiding myself from society, but still had my bearings, so I thought that these suggestions from these beings was just wrong. However, like the example I started with, after hearing it over and over again, it began to make some sort of sense. Being alone as an extrovert, I was desperate to feel safe amongst people again, and while I never recall being enthusiastic about it, I saw hurting this girl as a necessary evil. I had a plan and everything, but when the time came, I had sent her a weird text that concerned her, and she called a hospital and expressed her concern regarding my mentality. And luckily, an ambulance and a police officer got to my house moments before I left my house, knife in hand. So yeah, reflecting on that after treatment, that is the scariest experience I've ever had. My friend in college was schizophrenic. We were once hanging out in his dorm room at night, maybe 11 p.m. to midnight, and he got up to go to the bathroom. He opened the door and stopped, staring at the empty hallway. He asked me to come to the door and tell him if something seemed weird. I walk up to the door and see nothing strange in the hall and tell him so. He asked me if I can hear something. I say no. He said he heard muffled crying, or arguing, or something coming from down the hall, and he saw a pitch-black hallway when it was actually fully lit. He said the hall was black, not just dark or dimly lit. At this point he is shaking, and I'm terrified because I don't know he's sick. We're both on the verge of tears. I'm not even sure he knew he was sick at the time. I ended up walking him to the bathroom, and then spending the night in his room, because he could still hear someone crying in the hall. I thought for the longest time he was pulling my leg, but he ended up going to therapy and getting on meds very shortly after that night. So it was a terrifying and very real moment for him too.